Hi, everyone. Anne O'Connell with OC Publishing here, and welcome to the author journey. If you're watching the show, we did pre-tape this show a little earlier, but if you have questions, please put them in the comments, and Sarah and I will, my guest, Sarah and I will watch and we'll answer. But today, it's a very exciting day. We're going to be talking about different models of publishing with a focus on self-publishing, because my author today is Sarah Butland, and she is an author and a writing and publishing coach. And Sarah was born in Ontario in 1982. She actually gave me the date, or I saw it on a bio. And then she moved to New Brunswick and lived there for over 15 years. We have a lot in common. I was born in New Brunswick as well, or lived in New Brunswick, born, not lived. She lives in Nova Scotia now and has been married to her high school sweetheart and has a superstar son named William. Butland started creating while still learning to walk, and for years has put pen to paper to document her creations before they are lost. She says her first manuscripts were in dire need of editing. All of ours are, but she didn't seem to mind, nor did her readers. The first big break for Butland came when she was still a teenager, feeling like she was unlike every other teenager she knew. And she heard that her poem, Wrong Shell, won a poetry contest and would be published in their anthology. But they asked her to pay to move to the next level. So we'll talk a little bit about paying for contests and things like that. Butland's parents refused, and she began the struggle of discovering which awards were actually earned, not bought. From then on, Sarah realized her career of writing would be a difficult struggle, no matter how talented a writer she may be. Many stories, attempts at novels, and thousands of ideas later, Butland created Banana Boy, and The Adventures of Sammy was born with Sending You Sammy, her first published children's book. She also writes women's fiction, and most recently, a how-to for indie authors, Write Your Way, a handbook for indie publishers, and we'll dive into that as well. And she blogs and she reviews for Miramichi Reader. So let's bring Sarah up, and we'll get this party started. Hi, Sarah.
Hi, Anne. How are you?
Good. How are
It's
you?
a pleasure to be here again. I love your show.
Oh, thank you. It's so good to have you. And, as I always say, we have so much in common. And it's kind of like when writer friends get together, there's never any pause. There's never dull air. And it's funny because I think it stems from, we're all, in our little bubble and writing away. So when we get a chance to get out and collaborate, it just becomes a real fun time.
Right. It's a moment that introverts can become extroverted because they're talking the same language.
Exactly.
From the heart, right? It's not from the brain. OC
Yeah.
Publishing mug.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I should probably have a bunch on my desk. I have my ceramic one today, but so congratulations on your new book.
Thank you.
This is incredible. And I was saying to you earlier, it's like sitting down with a friend over a cup of tea and just chatting about, the ins and outs of this whole crazy business that we find ourselves in, right?
Absolutely. And that basically it stemmed from that because I did have many cups of tea with other fellow writers or aspiring authors. And that's how I decided to write it, how I would be having a conversation with passionate people like yourself, and just ease into it. And it really wasn't, I didn't want to stress about it. I didn't want to make it like, I don't know, so involved and so researched and so overwhelming for the reader that I just wanted to just say, yeah, this is how I answered this question and kind of elaborate on those questions that I would do in person.
Mm-hmm. And it really, it's very authentic. It's very personal. It's not like a dot to dot how to. It's just, here's my experience. Take it for what it's worth. And I think that people really appreciate that authenticity and transparency.
Yeah, I hope so, because it's the struggle of calling yourself an expert. I don't feel like any creative is an expert in their method of creativity. It's always something that you practice. It's always something you go back to and develop. And changed throughout the years from your perspective in your personal life. So
Mm-hmm.
when people came to me and like, oh, you know this, you've been through it, I still didn't see that as it's my expertise. It was my experience going through it. So that's
Mm-hmm.
all I can offer is what I've learned and what I've gone through, and the rejections hurt and they still hurt.
Mm-hmm.
To sympathize with the person going through that, and realizing that there are options out there, that you don't need to sit for 20 years and wait for that publisher to say, yes, I want this book. There are other ways to do what you love.
Mm-hmm. And it's I love that you bring that up, because it's a long and arduous process. And just the fact of writing and getting your manuscript done, and however many read throughs and edits, and then starts the querying process, or finding an agent, and if you're looking at the traditional path.
Right.
And I think both you and I went through that. And when I self-published my first two novels. My very first book was traditionally published. It was a nonfiction about getting settled in Dubai. It was a how-to with anecdotes and checklists and things like that.
Okay.
And I loved the process. And so at that point, I started to write more creatively. I'd been in PR my whole professional life, so had written lots of business type documents in PR and marketing and things like that, but started to dabble in writing fiction, and wrote my first fiction during National Novel Writing Month, NaNoWriMo, which just finished.
Right.
Um, and I wrote, that was in, oh my goodness, I think it was 2010. But fast forward, tried to get agents, pitch publishers and things. And then simultaneously started studying the whole self-publishing realm. So, I mean, is that similar to your situation? Like, how did it all begin for you
And
after
that,
after the poetry contest?
right. So it was funny. And I think I was trying to remember if I talked about this in our first chat on Author Talk. So Sammy, so back up a little bit. I've always wanted to write mystery. Mystery is like what I read the most of. It's where any TV show I watch, like it's a mystery.
Mm-hmm.
But there was one day, and I've always been mostly poetry that I wrote. And then one day at work, a previous job, I was coloring because it was a quiet thing we could do. I was on the phones, and I looked and I read the newspaper. So the newspaper was sitting by my coloring book, and it said the headlines of the day, and this was in New Brunswick, were childhood obesity rates on the rise and childhood literacy rates on the decline, especially with boys. And I looked over at and I won't say the superhero name, but my superhero, and I ran out of the color that he was supposed to be, and I colored him yellow and green. And I thought, like, what fun would it be to have a banana boy come alive and be a superhero that boys want to read about? The same, like, action packed, not fighting, not violence. But anyway, to summarize, I looked at it and I brought it home and I showed some people. Are like, that's great. And that's like the solution for right now for these headlines. And I don't even know what made the decision. I just said, let's put it out. Like, let's put it in a book. And I didn't even think about a publisher at that point. It was just, I wanted this out there.
And that's sending You Sammy, right?
Yeah, that's the one. So my husband at the time was working. He is still like a genius with printing and formatting and whatnot. So we hired an illustrator and came up with this, and it all came together pretty quickly. Not to say that it wasn't a lot of effort, but it came together.
Right.
The pictures are beautiful. And so we started researching ways to get it printed at a reasonable cost, and went through, at the time, Lightning Source, which is now Ingram Spark, and just did it and ordered some copies, and they sold. And that, I mean, I didn't even think at that point to go anywhere. And then, so after that, to reimburse the illustrator, already paid for, but to make money back from that, I came out with a short story collection, just a quick, much easier to send to Lightning Source, because it doesn't have the pictures per page. It doesn't, a little bit easier formatting. And then we just got used to that format, and it was so easy because they were being in Canada, they were a distributor in Canada, so it could be available through Indigo, as well as Amazon, as well as Barnes and Noble, and that just seemed to be the way. Then I decided, let's take a look at this, and should I start pitching others, because writing's always been what I wanted to do. And I thought, well, pitching it, because back then, I think it was 2000, Sammy was printed, early 2000s, when self-publishing just wasn't accepted.
It wasn't a thing.
Yeah, like it just wasn't, but it was what I wanted to do. Like, and it was so easy, and it was so beautiful, and the quality was great. It didn't make sense to go another way for that. But then I thought, for novels, should I start pitching? So I have since then pitched a couple of children's books to various Canadian publishers. And just looking at the turnaround time is months, if not years. And I just said, like, why am I waiting? Like, this is something I want now. So I went through, like, I got the editors, I got the cover designers, I got, like, the struggle between self-publishing and indie publishing is real. I always knew I needed editors, so I always had editors, cover designers. I hired local. So it is indie publishing because it's a team of people supporting my book. And I said, like, now I have a book in hand. And also to rewind a little bit, when I had Sammy in the schools in New Brunswick, I was still in New Brunswick at the time, writers in the schools begged me to come in and share my book. And that was unheard of because you weren't with a major publisher.
Right.
But they loved me. And then I had a phone call from one of the teachers or the principal, I can't remember which, if we send a slip home to the parents, are you able to bring us some books if they want to buy one? And I laughed. Like, that was my initial, like, yes, of course. What do you mean? And they said, well, you're our first self-published, typically, or indie published. Typically, we wouldn't be allowed to sell. Like, the author's not allowed to come in with books to sell because
in a classroom.
It blew my mind. And from then on, like, it was just so, and I get it. The publisher wants to keep track of numbers. They wanted, like, you're putting out a lot of money. I just couldn't understand the author not being able to sell their book.
Some of that is shifting, and it's probably still the same in the schools, but, nowadays, even if you're traditionally published, an indie author or a traditionally published author can purchase author copies, and sell them, at an event and that kind of thing. Right. But schools, there might be some limitations for sure.
It's just more of a hurdle. So it was just a shocking discovery of mine that early on, and I'm like, why would you not be able to sell your own book?
And you know what? It continues to be really difficult with children's books. The competition is stiff. Publishers are very choosy because it's very expensive to produce a children's book. It's a genre that I produce, and the fact, as a hybrid publisher, and doing print on demand, the cost per book is pretty high. So you got to be going into it with your eyes wide open. Absolutely. And I would want to step back a little bit and just kind of re-emphasize some of the differences that you have talked about. Self-publishing, if you look at it in its true sense of the word, the author, does the writing, the editing, the design, and setting up and distribution and sales and all that kind of stuff. It's kind of morphed, and you mentioned sort of indie and building your team. Most self-published authors are recognizing the importance of having that team in order to have a quality product, so that as things continue to shift a bit, and the recognition that there are quality self, indie, and hybrid books out on the market. You have to do your research, your due diligence regardless, but building that team is really critical. So I'm glad that that you brought that up, hiring an editor, not just your mom or a retired English teacher. Now,
Right.
mind you, those are very important people to have on your team, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Right.
And
So for
beta readers. I mean, beta readers are wonderful.
So what do you ask of your beta readers, Sarah?
From beta readers, I didn't get beta readers until Losing It at 40, because it was a genre that I have never thought I would write. It's romance, rom-com. And I just didn't know. It's not that I don't read romance, but I don't read a lot of romance. So I wasn't sure at the end of it if it would fit in that, I don't want to say box, but if romance readers would like it. So when I searched for beta readers, and I said, like, just let me know if it's worthwhile. Like, did I make this, like, am I completely off the mark with Annabelle? Am I like, does it not make sense? Is it forced? So I sent it out. I think I had 8 at the time. And I said, like, level of spice, good. Do I work with this? Do I edit it? Do I trash it and say it was a fun little project for me? The answers were hilarious, because some would say, like, oh, it just wasn't quite spicy enough. It was a sweet story. I liked it. And then the next one would be, wow, it's a lot spicier than I would have imagined. And it was like the perfect, I don't know, from what I hear
combination
from authors, that perfect blend of, we all really like the story. We all have a different opinion, and that's fine. That's great. So,
which is exactly what you want. And what I loved about it, it reminds me, it's like the 40-year-old virgin with Steve Carell from the woman's perspective, right?
Yeah, a little bit.
Yeah, fun. So a beta reader, just to for those who are listening, they're not doing any editing. They're not doing any formal part, unless if you get some great feedback that you can pull for blurbs or quotes for your cover, then that's golden, right? But it's separate. They're reading it as an end reader, somebody who enjoys that particular genre, who will read and find any hiccups or any holes, say, oh, I found this kind of confusing, I wasn't really sure where she was going with this, or the ending didn't make sense. Those kinds of things are really important, when after you finished what I call your first shitty draft. Because like you said, early projects, dire need of editing. Everybody's early projects were in dire need of editing. Sarah, don't be special. So I was really fortunate. One of my beta readers for my second novel, and when I started writing my first one, I had no intention to write a novel. I was writing Menopause, or Mental Pause was the book, and I was in the midst of perimenopause. I was having horrible mood swings, night sweats, the whole shooting match. And I was just writing about the symptoms to make myself feel better. And I just writing, and it turned into, like, the person I was writing about started to be outside of myself. And that person wound up on trial for murder, because, let's admit it, ladies, sometimes we feel like killing somebody when we're in the throes, right? And that went on to be an award winner. It won an Ippy. So that kind of, I know, gave me the confidence, the nerve to think that I could keep writing. So then I'm naturally prone to writing mystery. Like you, one of my favorite genres to read. I watch all of the crime shows, everyone, you name it, I've watched them. I read lots of murder, like mystery, detective, all that kind of stuff. I had a beta reader for my second, Deep Deceit, my second novel, who told me, this is a series. This main character should be, and I'm like, ooh. So that's what I'm working on.
I get that all the time, that, like, well, what happens next? I'm like, no, that's a one and done. Like, I'm not going back. No, we need
but
this.
It wasn't, right?
And then I have to go back with Losing It and Gaining It. So Losing It at 41 and Gaining It at 40. No, Losing It at 40, Gaining It at 41. 40, yeah. When I wrote the Losing It, I had nope, that's just, I'm going to see where this goes and pack it away, and that's it. And then people want a second one. I'm like, I don't even remember the characters of the first. Like, I do remember. I knew Annabelle.
Yeah.
But the find, and I'm like, I should have written it down, but I had no idea that people would want a second. It was just a fun little project I worked on between deadlines and after work.
Right.
And that, so now I know. Now I'm learning. Write down the character's name and keep an outline of timeline of where they're going. Because now, of course, I'm into a third Annabelle, very, very beginning stages. And I still,
good.
Yeah, I should have done it. Should have wrote down all the characters.
I'm doing that now. I'm pulling out all my character charts. Because there will be a couple of characters that continue through in the second, third, and fourth. So I've got at least the next 3 sort of semi-planned out. The next 2 are pretty fleshed out. But yeah, those character charts are really critical because you don't want to change her hair from, black to blonde unless she dyes it, as a scene or a character development, or the eyes go from brown to green, or she's from, I have to.
Sorry. With the indie publishing too, a great aspect of it is you can go and change it. If you realize afterwards that you did change the color of the eye color of the main character, go in and change it. With it published, it's it's harder. They have a certain amount of print run to. So I'm not against publishing, but there are so many perks to indie publishing.
Traditional. Yeah. I mean, you would hope that there's been enough of an editing process, even in
that's
indie,
true. Not always.
Or self-publishing, right? But you can, there are always typos that get missed, and I cringe, and I go right in, I fix them, and I reload, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And then if anybody catches it, I just say, it's fixed, I'm sorry.
So even Stephen King, who has I don't know how many editors work on his stuff, every once in a while I'll read his books and I'm like, wow, they missed that. And how is that possible? But that's it. They can't change it until there's a second run, right? But
pretty much any even trad book that I read, you find at least 1 or 2. But that again, it's not the be all and end all.
Right.
And but like you said, the beauty is, we're not doing huge print runs. And I think that is it's going to be a thing of the past as well, as the whole industry, it reevaluates, the realities and the increases in printing costs. They're going up for everybody, even the traditionals. And does it make sense to warehouse thousands of copies of books that some of them wind up getting destroyed? So there is a huge shift happening in the publishing business. Now, I also wanted to make sure that we touch a little bit on, you talked about Lightning Source, and now it's Ingram Spark. Lightning Source continues to be their printing arm, but they're now, I don't know if Lightning Source was a Canadian company way back, but they're in the US now. And so it becomes a bit of a challenge, but talk a little bit about, I know that, you use KDP, or do you use Ingram Spark at this point?
Both, actually.
Okay.
But I like, and I don't want to put myself into a predicament, but Lightning Source, I like. Yes, they are in the US, and we searched when we came out with Sammy. We wanted a local and local Maritimes, local Eastern Canada, local Canada, and we kept broadening that. It wasn't feasible. It wasn't cost effective. It wasn't you'd have to order a minimum of I don't know how many books, and it was outrageous. So I don't love that I went with a US company, but Lightning Source, Ingram Spark offers everything and more. Amazon is Amazon centric. They are very specific on, even if you have expanded distribution, it really isn't. Lightning Source sends out a catalog of, here's our titles. Do you want to take them to the Canadian arms as well? Being in Canada, you want Indigo to carry it, right? You want to find it in your local polls or chapters. Not to say that they will, but it's easier if it is through a distributor with them. System. So that was the perk. That was the benefit. So I found exactly the same, and that's why I love that you and I have had such parallel paths, because
I want to emphasize that there are lots and lots of opportunities, lots of options. But you hear, Sarah has been researching and exploring this since, mid 2000s. I've been doing the same since 2010. And I'm the same as you. I keep coming back to Ingram Spark because of the global distribution. And every single time I do a print run, I will compare. Like I have a couple of printers I use in Canada. I love Rapido in Montreal,
Okay.
and they are often competitive. So I will compare, and sometimes I need it quicker than I can get from Ingram Spark. So
Right.
if it's comparable, if the print is anything over 100, Rapido is usually the better option for me. But anything smaller, or if I'm ordering review copies, I always order it from Ingram Spark. They're, the Lightning Source printer.
Right.
So that's important. I have, I know people who have used Freeze and Press, which is a good option, but it is, again, more expensive, and they don't do the distribution piece. I know people who have used Telwell, and they're in British Columbia. But as you say, Sarah, it's really hard to find all of the pieces local. But I do try very hard to use local editors and designers and proofers and that kind of thing. So the team is, predominantly Canadian.
Yeah. Yeah. And I've seen, like, talking about the quality, in the beginning, I saw a lot of Lulu. The quality there. Like, they were peeling, like the laminate was peeling off of it. And I'm just like, I've never had an issue with Lightning Source. I mean, there was a little, like, again, with a children's book, the cover kind of goes off a little bit. Completely expected with printing. That's going to happen. It's going to tilt a little bit. It's going to bleed a little bit. There's going to
be some, And but they'll replace those. I have never ever had an issue that I haven't. And I say to anytime I have a chance, I say to them, please open a Canadian arm. Like there should be a Lightning Source in Canada, so that if there are more Canadian, absolutely. But they've always replaced anything that's
and I've heard
quality is off.
And then recently, a few months ago, somebody asked me, like, oh, I've looked online and everybody's complaining about them. And I'm like, you're going to find complaints about every company that exists. Like, look at all my books. You can't tell whether they're printed through Amazon or Lightning Source or a mainstream publisher. You compare them, the quality's there, right? So if you're looking for complaints, you're going to find them. I've never had complaints with, I did have one issue with Lightning Source, but it's now been resolved. But that was like a very one of, like, and again, like you say, the distribution factor. You can't easily get a distributor for an indie published book still today. So that's your solution, right?
And I also wanted to say to anybody who's watching who is a self or indie published author, pound the pavement. You got to go and, meet face to face with bookstores. There are some that are, many will say, oh, we already have, our suppliers, but many have local author sections. So make sure that you understand.
Look at a self-published, because there's still that general idea that self-published means it's not edited. And I appreciate the hesitation, because there's some that are not edited well. There's some that are like somebody had their mother look at it and they pieced it together on the but it's changing. There's so much more quality. There's so many more options at these stores, and pounding the pavement and going to the bookstores. I think you still need to do that being traditionally published. You need to put your, I say to people, you're not selling the book, you're selling your story. And the publisher's not going to sell you. The publisher's going to try and get your book on the shelf. You go and handshake the bookstore owner, they're going to want your book on the shelf, whether you're indie or traditional. So I agree. And this day, you like, no matter what way you go, you need to market and you need to put in the effort to show yourself and your brand.
And I think that you had mentioned before we started recording that you had a question from somebody in advance.
Yes.
Do you want to address that question?
Lana Shoup, the fabulous author herself.
Love Lana. Hi, Lana.
Lana,
She's probably going to be watching when it goes on.
She sent me a message this morning. Her and Mark Shoup, author as well, that they were going to be at the airport. They're on their way on a flight, so they're waiting at the airport and going to try and tune in. So if you're tuned in now, hi. If you're tuned in later, hello. Safe travels either way. Hopefully they land safely. So Lana said, when did you come to the decision to self-publish? Was it your intention from the beginning, or did it come after a world of disappointments from unaccepted submissions to traditional publishers? I have been thinking all morning since she sent this question. Sammy, I didn't send out. I didn't pitch, I don't think, anywhere. It just, we looked at our options for indie publishing and went with it. We found the printer, we made the choice. And that's with children's books, especially when you send to a traditional publisher, for good or for bad, they provide the illustrator. Usually it works. I've never read a children's book that it didn't match the wonderful illustrations that were paired with it.
You use professional illustrators.
Right. But a lot of people cringe at that because I know a lot of people that are both writers and artists. They want their illustrations with it. Well, this is the option. I don't know why. Like, thinking back, I think I was young and naive and just wanted the story out when I wanted it out. I didn't want to wait. I was excited for Sammy to go to the kids and just did it.
And once you learn how, it's hard to not to, right?
Exactly. And
so I just started a publishing company.
And have pitched stories and got the rejection. I'm like, why am I putting myself through this? It's, I don't know. I mean, not to say indie's right for everyone.
No, absolutely.
I just, again, control, which I talk about in Write Your Way. I loved having control over everything, I guess, almost everything. And just didn't, time is precious. Time is of the essence. And to hear like, oh yeah, I got accepted and it's going to come out in 3 years, I cringe. I'm like, wow, like you can get a book indie published in like 6 months. It may not be like the parade and everything that goes with that, but you can get it in your hands so quickly, I think.
And it's definitely, it's one of the pros for sure. And we've touched on a lot of the pros and cons. And I want to make sure that I share how to get in touch with you before we sign off. Best way to get in touch with Sarah, if you're interested in learning more about her books and reaching out to her, sarahbutland.com, and follow her on facebook.com/Sarah Butland. And I also want to say, as we're wrapping up, I can't believe that we're already at our 30 mark. There are lots of opportunities, lots of options. But if you are seeking a traditional route, there are publishers that will take unsolicited manuscripts, many that want you to have an agent. With my first book, I queried for about a year. I had, lukewarm and hot replies, people requesting chapters. And then finally, my mom, who was probably in her 80s at the time, she's 99 now, said, when's your book coming out? So she was like really pushing me. So that was part of my motivation. But I wanted to share, if you're looking, if you're in Canada, Atlantic Publishers, there's a list of Atlantic Publishers on the WFNS website, Writers Federation of Nova Scotia, that you can have a look at. I'm going to bring that up here just so you can see. It's a big, long list. It's a great place to start, to contact and read through. And if you scroll down to the O's, I'm there. There I am, right under Nimbus. How exciting is that? We're kind of in a holding pattern currently, but feel free to have a look on my website, ocpublishing.ca, and get a feel for what a hybrid publishing process looks like. And reach out. Any questions? I know Sarah is happy to take on some coaching clients. And so I'm really, thank you so much for joining me today, Sarah. I can't believe that we're already at our time, but
and I can't wait to see you at the fantastic Grown Up Book Fair on Saturday, December
Saturday.
9th.
That's what I was going to say. Yes, this Saturday intro, December 9th, the fantastic Grown Up Book Fair at the Legion in Truro. So, and then I'll be at the Booktoberfest on Monday night, the 11th. WFNS and Halifax Public Libraries will be sponsoring that, and it's just all books all the time now that we're
great
in the
for Christmas shopping.
Yay! So thanks again, Sarah, for joining me, and we'll see you again soon. And congratulations on your book.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Nice to see you. And thank you for joining us on the author journey today. I'm Anne O'Connell with OC Publishing, and I'll see you again next time. Bye.